Well, how's everybody doing out there? Well, welcome to day 4 of Corona Online School. So hopefully everybody did a good job working with sections 2.3 and 2.4 and are ready to move on to some more data stuff. So last time we talked about everything was kind of visual data, so we had our box plots, and things like that. So now what we want to do is talk about data, but from a numerical perspective. And so one of the most important things that we want to talk about when it comes to measuring data is where's the center? So what's the actual middle of our data? So today what we want to do is talk about 3 different types of measures of center. We want to talk about the mean, or sometimes called the average, the median, or the mode in this case. So if we look down below, we've got some nice definitions for each of these guys. So the mean or the average is just the sum of all the data points divided by the number of data points. So for example, if you thought about like a math test or something like, or a math class, you might have 5 exams. You wanted to know what your average was on those 5 exams. You would just add the 5 scores together, divide by 5, and that would give you your average. So that's really what R is talking about here. Now, the one thing to note is under mean, we've actually got 2 different types of mean. So in the first situation, they're talking about for a sample size, lowercase n, and the second, they're talking about for a population of size capital N. So the very first one, so in this case, the x with the line over it, are called x bar, is what's called the sample mean. And that's the mean that we're going to be talking about probably almost 99.9% of the times, because in most cases, it's too hard to assume that we're actually going to have every single data value. So in most cases, we aren't going to be working with like the population mean. In most cases, we're going to be working with the sample mean. And so, but the one below is called the population mean, and so it's the Greek letter mu in this case. So mu, and it's the population mean. And so notice 2 big distinctions on this formula between the sample mean and the population mean is just the n at the bottom. So in general, when we're talking about the sample size, we're always going to use a lowercase n. Whenever talking about the population size, we're always going to use a capital N. But otherwise, these 2 formulas are exactly the same. Now, you may not recognize the symbols, but otherwise they look the same. So in this case, the little sigma that we've got there actually stands for the sum of. So what that top sentence says is sum all of the data points together. So the x are the different data points. And then we're going to add all those guys together, and then we're going to divide by n, which is the total number of data values. And then again, the bottom one's exactly the same. The only difference is we've got a population size instead of a sample size, but otherwise it's exactly the same. All right, so the median, so that's actually what we talked about last time in our 5-number summary. So again, it's the very middle of the data. So 50% of the data lives to the left of it, 50% of the data lives to the right of it. We talked about some ways to find it last time, kind of using that slash off the ends method and using the 1var stats on the calculator. So today we're actually going to learn another way. And so this is by using this little formula that actually gives us the location of the position. So again, the number that we calculate here isn't the actual median itself. It just tells us where to find the median on the list. So location of the median. And so what's going to happen when you calculate this, you're going to end up with 2 different types of numbers. You're either going to end up with a whole number, or you're going to end up with like a number like 12.5, for example. So if we end up with a whole number, say 10, for example, then that means if we count over on our list 10 spots, and again, I forgot to mention, the data has to be ordered lowest to highest. So if it's not ordered lowest to highest, we can't find the median that way. But if it's ordered from lowest to highest, we start at the lowest number and we count up 10, that 10th number will be the actual median. But if we happen to get an answer like 12.5, then that means our median actually lives between the 12th and the 13th number on our list. So what we'd have to do is find the 12th number on our list, again counting from lowest up, and then take the number right beside it, average those two together, and that would actually give us our median in that case. And then finally, the last thing, and probably the least useful of all the centers, is what's called the mode. And so the mode is just the most common value that occurs. It's the one that occurs most often. So if you were thinking about like a graph of a histogram, for example, the mode would be the tallest bar in our histogram. If you were thinking about a frequency distribution, it would be the row that had the highest frequency and stuff like that. So again, one of the reasons that mode's probably not the most useful is just because you can actually have a set of data where there's more than one mode. So if there's two numbers that are that are used the most often, then both of those would technically be considered the mode, and so the data would be considered bimodal. If you had three numbers that had the exact same thing, like it could be trimodal. And technically, if you have more numbers than that, they usually call it multimodal, but at that point it's really useless because there's just so many of them, it's not even worth talking about. But all right, so let's look at some examples here. So in this case, we've got test scores for a statistics class that are held during the evening are as follows. So we've got a bunch of data that are in our list here. And so if we wanted to find the mean, say we want to do this by hand, what we would do is actually just add up all these different values. And then in this case, there's 20 values total. And so we would just divide that number by 20, and that would give us our list, and we're done. So in this case, like I'll show you on the calculator how you could actually do it. So, I mean, you probably know how to do it anyway, but so you would just, type 98 plus 78 plus 68 plus 83 plus 81 plus 89 plus 88 plus 76, 65, 45, 98. Why did I pick such a long example? What was I thinking? 80, 84, 85, 79, 78, 98, 90, and 25. Now at this point, don't just hit divides, because if you do hit divide right now, it's actually just going to divide the last number, and we're going to get a totally wrong answer. So what you want to do at this point is actually hit enter. So it looks like all of our scores added together equals 1,578. Now we want to divide this guy by 20 to get our average. So it looks like our average test score on this exam was 78.9. So let me flick back here. So it looks like we get 78.9. All right. So for the median, in this case, what we know is, again, if we use kind of that formula from above, if we take n is 20, so 20 plus 1 divided by 2 gives us 21 over 2, which if we calculate that gives us 10.5. So what this tells us is the location of the median is somewhere between the 10th and 11th number. Now, the way this list is set up right now, can I go ahead and count that? No, because this list is all out of order, so that's not going to help us at all. So before I can do anything else, I've actually got to put this in order. So of course you could do this by hand, write it all down and put them in order. But let me show you a little trick on the calculator that you can use. And you can do this on Google Sheets also. I was trying to do it, like it's a little bit trickier on the iPad, but if you have Google Sheets on the computer, it's a lot easier to do. But I can show you how to do that also. But anyway, so if we go to the calculator and we go to stat mode, I'm going to need these in there anyway. So go ahead and put edit in just like we did before. And so let me clear out my list. So remember, go up to the L1, hit clear and enter. Go over to L2, hit clear and hit enter. And now I just want to type in all the data. So again, just type them in the way they came. Don't try to sort them on your own or anything like that. 68, 83, 81, 89, 88, 76, 65, 45. Again, why did I pick such a long problem? 90, 80, 84, 85, 79, 78, 98, 90, and 25. Woo, got them all. All right, so now that we got all of our data in there, and again, usually it doesn't hurt to check and make sure you've got the right number. So notice if I highlight the last number, there's a little 20 there that tells me I'm in the 20th position. I had 20 data values, so at least I didn't forget any. I may have accidentally typed one in wrong, but hopefully I didn't. So now what we want to do is hit second mode to quit again, go back into stat mode. But this time, if we go to sort A, so this will actually sort this list ascending, so it'll go from lowest to highest. Now in this, you do have to tell it what list you want to sort. So if you remember, all of our lists are on the number button. So like 1, 2, 3 have all the L1s, L2s, stuff like that. So all of our data was in L1. So if we just hit sort ascending L1, it says done, so at this point it doesn't look like it actually did anything, but the magic happens when we go back to stat again. So hit the stat button, go to edit. Lo and behold, if I go back up to the top, now everything's written from lowest to highest. So again, that takes a lot less time than having to try to do it on paper on your own and stuff. So now let me just go back real quick. And I saw my median was in the 10.5 position, so that means I want to look between the 10th and 11th numbers to find my median. So in this case, if I go down, my 10th number was 81, my 11th number was 83, so I want to average those two guys to find my median. So let's go back here. So 81 plus 83 over 2 gives me 164 over 2, which gives me a median of 82. All right, perfect. And so now finally for mode, again, mode's hard to look at when it's kind of written this way because again, all the numbers are scattered around. So by sorting them, it does allow a nice way to actually find the mode as well. So this one's kind of a weird data set. So if you go through and kind of look, so I've got 278s there. Oh, 290s. And 290, 398s? Did I miss a data? Oh, 398s. Oh, I misread it. So good. So I'm glad I did it this way because I miscounted when I did it the other way. So in this case, I've got 398s. So that means 98 occurs most often on our list. So that would be our mode for this problem. So again, that's kind of one of the nice things when you're doing mode. It's nice to have that sorting feature so that way you can kind of go through and look at it. So in this case, our mode would be 98. So as you can see, here's some data that have three ridiculously different measures of center. So, and this just kind of goes to show you why, well, first off, why mode's kind of a bad center, because, you know, is 98 really the center of this data? I mean, heck, it's the highest score that occurred. So it just so happens three people scored 98s, but it definitely doesn't do a good job of measuring the middle of this data since it's actually measuring the max of the data. So this actually turns out to be a nice example for that reason. Mean and the median, they're not terribly off, and we'll talk about why they're off in a little bit. It mostly has to do with the outliers, and notice there's a test score of a 25 in there, so that's kind of what's actually throwing this guy off a little bit. So let me show you how to do this using the calculator totally without having to like do it like what I did. It was kind of a manual way to do it. So there's a way that you can also do this using the 1var stats just like we did last time. So let me go back to the calculator real quick. So luckily I've got all the data in there. And so if I go back to quit and do stat and then go to calc again and then do 1var stats. So again, I've got everything in list 1, so I can just hit enter. So last time I told you to ignore all the stuff on the left-hand side, but now notice I've got that X bar is actually sitting there. So our sample mean is actually part of the 1var stats. And some of this other stuff we're going to use later, but I'm not going to talk about it later. So notice n equals 20 is on our list. So it's telling us how many data points are in our set. And of course, we've got our 5-number summary that we had over here before, our min, our Q1, our median, our Q3 and our max. So let's verify that our sample mean and median match what we calculated the other way. So we can see it does. So I've got 78.9 and 82 on our sheet. Now the one thing, notice there's no mode anywhere on here, and that's one of the kind of the downsides about using the calculator. The calculator doesn't have a way to actually calculate the mode. So if you're going to do mode, you really have to do it the manual way, sort it lowest to highest, and then kind of physically go in and count them. Or if you have a frequency distribution table or something, you can do it that way as well. All right, so I've actually made, for people that don't have a calculator, I've actually made a little Google Sheets that'll actually do all this stuff for you as well. So in this case, if you, and I've added it to the 5-number summary, so it's actually the same sheet that we worked on for the 5-number summary. So if we actually go down here to A2, and just like we did before, just enter the data in. So 98, 78, 68, 83, 81, 89, 88, 76, 65, 45, 98, 90, 80, 84, 85, 79, 78, 98, 90, and 25. All right, so let me scroll back up here. Let's get rid of this. And so all the time we were typing stuff in, everything should have been populating over on the right-hand side. And so lo and behold, look, we've got our median is 82. Our mean is 78.9, but the cool thing about Excel or Google Docs, either one, is it will actually calculate the mode for you. So notice in this case, it told us the mode was 98. So it actually has a feature that will allow you to do it and stuff like that. And you can actually sort the data. It's a little trickier on the iPad than it is on the computer, but if you wanted to sort this data, like if I and I'm on an iPad, so if you were doing this on an iPad or an iPhone, this is what you'd have to do. So you would go to highlight the first column and then go to where that little blue dot is and just drag it down until you get all the data in the list. And then if you notice, there's a little like kind of 3 arrows beside the enter the data. So if I click on that, it gives me the option to sort. So if I hit sort ascending at this point, now it puts them all in order lowest to highest. And so on the Google Sheets on the computer, it's actually just one of the click buttons up on the toolbar. So it's a little bit easier to see and stuff like that. But I'll share this form with you so that way if you don't have access to a TI calculator or if you don't have that app I was showing, you can still be able to do all these problems and stuff like that. So, all right. So if anybody has any questions about that, please let me know. So otherwise, let's jump back to the practice sheet real quick. So now what happens if we've got a frequency table? How do we actually calculate the mean and the standard deviation in that way? Well, I mean, one way you could actually do this is you could like list the data all out. So remember, a score of 68 with a frequency of 3 means we could do 68 plus 68 plus 68. And then say, okay, well, I've got 271, so let me add 71 plus 71, and then kind of keep going that way. That's totally going to work. That would work perfectly fine. It would also work the way I showed you in the calculator. You could just list all these guys out and things like that, and it would totally work. You could use the 1-bar stats, or you could use the Excel document. But another way that you can do it, if you're calculating it by hand, is remember this just means that there's 3 scores of 68. So what I could do is just do 3 times 68 plus 2 times 71 plus 5 times 75 plus 3 times 77 plus 4 times 83 plus 3 times 89. So that would be the sum of all my data points. That would be the top. And then I need to figure out how many data points there actually are. And so if I add this up, I get 5, 10, 13, 17, 20. So it looks like there's 20 data points total. So in this case, my mean would be to just throw all that stuff in the calculator and divide by 20. Or again, like if I wanted to use the 1var stats, I could just manually go in and type, 68 3 times, then 71 2 times, then 75 5 times, then 77 3 times, 83 4 times. So either way, you can kind of do it either way. Same thing on the Excel doc or the Google Sheets doc, you could do it that way. Now, so I'll leave you to do that calculation on your own. Now, the median actually comes in handy for the frequency table. So again, you have to calculate it by hand, but it's actually not that bad. So again, we're going to use that formula, n plus 1 over 2. So again, our number of data points was 20. So I get 20 plus 1 over 2 gives me 21 over 2, which again, just like last time, was 10.5. So what I want to figure out is where the 10th and 11th digit is on this list, where they actually fall. So what I want to do is, again, start with the bottom frequency and kind of count up until I get the 10th number and then the 11th number. So in this case, at the end of 75, that's going to be my very 10th digit. So the 10th digit on my list is going to be 75. The 11th digit on my list is going to be that first 77 in this case. So 10th digit is 75, the 11th digit is 77. And again, that's just by adding 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 5 is 10. So that's telling me exactly where the 10th number is. So again, to find the median, in this case, I want to average 75 and 77. So I go down here, do 75 plus 77 divided by 2 gives me 152 all over 2, and then that gives me a 76. So in this case, for this, well, I didn't figure out what the mean was, but you figure it out for me. And then we know our median in this case is 76. All right, so that's kind of the brute force method of finding the mean and the median from a frequency table. So it turns out you can actually use the calculator to do a frequency table and find the mean and the median. You cannot use Google Sheets easily. It doesn't really work that well. It's not really made to do that. So if you were using a frequency table and you were doing the Google Sheets, you'd almost have to just list the data in there all at once. Unfortunately, there's really no, other than kind of like what I did here. I mean, you end up kind of doing the exact same thing, which can be a little tedious. So let's look at example 3. I'll show you how to do a frequency table, find the mean and the median from a frequency table, just in case you want to use it. And then there's some practice ones for you guys to work on. And if you have any questions, just let me know. So in this case, let's look at our data here. So find the mean and the median for the data summarized by the following frequency table. This is the frequency of airline no-shows. So in this case, we had zero no-shows was 37 people, 1 no-show was 31, 2 no-shows were 20, 3 no-shows were 16, 4 no-shows were 12, and then 5 no-shows were 4. So again, what we want to do is actually put this data in the calculator first if we're going to use the calculator to do it. So what I'm going to do is go back to Stat, go back to Edit, but in this case I'm going to use List 1 and List 2. So let's clear out List 1, and if you have something in List 2, clear it out. So List 1, I'm going to make the number of no-shows, and L2 I'm going to make the frequency. So in this case I'm just going to go down 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So those are my number of no-shows. And then my frequency, so I had 37 0 no-shows, 31 that had 1 no-show, 20 that had 2, 16, 12, and 4. All right, so again, just kind of make sure everything's in there, everything looks good. So again, hit second mode to quit out of that, and then back to Stats, and then Calc again, and then we're actually still going to use 1var Stats. But in this case, don't hit Enter, because if you hit Enter, it's just going to calculate the stats for L1, which was just the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what we want to do, since we've got data in L1 and L2, we actually want to put both of those down. So what we have to do is hit L1, comma, L2. And so comma is just right above the 7 in this case. And then second 2 to get L2. And then when we hit enter, lo and behold, we've got our X bar is 1.55833333. And then we also get the 5-number summary, which is actually kind of cool from our frequency data. So the minimum was 0, which we actually saw. The maximum was 5, which we saw. Turns out the Q1 is actually 0 also, and I think some of you guys encountered that on some of the practice problems where weird things can happen with the 5-number summary where the min, the Q1, or the Q1 and the median could be the same. So here's another set of data that shows that as well. Our median is 1, our Q3 is 3. So let me jot these down over on the other side here. So I've got 1.56 for my mean, which was my X bar, and I think my median was 1, but let me check here. Yep, my median was 1. Good. All right. Now mode, so the cool thing about mode is it's super easy to identify the mode from in a frequency distribution table because it's just going to be the biggest frequency that shows up. So in this case, the number of no-shows being 0 had a frequency of 37, so it occurred the most often. So in this case, our mode would just be 0. So again, this kind of gives you an idea of how to do this using Google Sheets, the calculator, by hand. So you can kind of pick and choose what you're working on and stuff like that. I mean, have some fun with it. I've got some practice problems in here. They should look very familiar to you. So you've kind of been working on the same data the whole entire time, just learning more and more about them as we go along. So try those practice problems, and then when you're done with those, come back and we'll look at the 2.6 video next. Good job.